When it comes to who do you trust, I suppose that's one of the big issues of life. And, regularly near the bottom of that list, slightly under journalists, although that varies from time to time, is politicians. And perhaps we've got less reason to trust the politicians than we had previously. Political commentator Dr Bryce Edwards joins us on the program. Bryce, kia ora. Thank you so much for your time today.
Morena, Andrew.
Now, a couple of issues on this one. Firstly, not just the politicians, but the whole electoral system. New Zealand can pride itself on being one of the least corrupt countries in the world, and we've got free and fair democracy. We used to, perhaps less free and fair than it used to be, Bryce.
Look, yes, trust is a hugely important issue in any society, to make sure that people get along and can use the political system, can do business, and when it starts breaking down, you have all sorts of problems. So the public need to be able to trust the media, the electoral system, trust that governments will do what they say they're going to do, and all sorts of things like that. And obviously at the heart of democracy are these elections we have every 3 years. And New Zealand does these elections quite well. We've always had an electoral commission that you can sort of trust that, when you tick your ballot form, that it's going to be counted.
Yep.
And that it's going to add up, and there's no one kind of interfering and trying to steal the election.
Mm-hmm.
But the Auditor General put out a report a few days ago, and he investigated, his office at least, investigated last year's elections because there had been some complaints. Yep. That it hadn't really been... The votes hadn't really been counted correctly, and he found there really was some problems.
Now, some people voting twice, a whole ballot box disappeared somewhere. It's not exactly stop the steal, but it does show that, standards are slipping, perhaps?
Yeah, I think standards are slipping is probably a good way of putting it. Like, nothing nefarious has happened, nothing untoward, but the Electoral Commission, some of their quality assurance processes haven't been working. And part of it relates, of course, to the fact of how you try and get everyone voting. Yep. And so for the last couple of elections, the laws have been changed so that you can enroll to vote as late as on election day. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not enrolled, you can rock on up to the booth and say, hey, I'm not enrolled, but I would like to enroll. And then vote. And that has really complicated things for the Electoral Commission. And when they go to count the votes, they then have to go and check these people and find out if they're real voters, etc. Yep. And it's slowed things down quite considerably. It's put them under pressure. It's meant they've had to cut some corners.
To be fair, though, it's also opened the doors to allow more people to vote, which is in itself a good thing for democracy. And we're talking pretty small numbers here. This isn't going to change the election result. Let's not get all Trumpian about it, but perhaps with a change of system, we need to complete the feedback loop and do better next time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a debate going on now in Parliament between the parties of left and right about when that when that enrolment should close. Yep. In some countries, it closes weeks before the election. And I guess the left are arguing it should stay. You should be allowed to vote on, enroll and vote on election day. Mm-hmm. The parties on the right are saying, well, that's not really working out very well. Let's take it back to a day before, cut off the roll then. And the problem is that it suits the left because to have enrolment included on voting day, because it's often people like renters, lower socioeconomic groups, or individuals, I should say, that are tending to enroll late, whereas the right has their voters more inclined to enroll early. Yep. So it's become a bit of a tussle between what interests either side. So it's a bit of a problem in that regard.
It's not just the system, but the politicians that were elected in the last election that there's perhaps some trust issues over. In particular, looking at this fast track legislation, the triumvirate of politicians will be making choices instead of going through the due process of the RMA in some special particular cases. Glad to see, I suppose, in one point, Bryce, that the fast-track legislation isn't being fast-tracked, but it's hit a bit of a speed bump in terms of the amount of negative submissions about it.
Yes, so of course, any new piece of legislation has to go through select committees, and so this one's really big. And so for the next 6 weeks, the Environmental Select Committee at Parliament are hearing submissions. We had about 27,000 people submit on this, and a few thousand of those people want to talk to the committee, present on their submission.
Yep.
And so politicians are listening to these people. We're having some, big names that have already submitted, like Federated Farmers, the Employers Association,
Yep.
and we're having a lot of environmental groups. And so it's becoming a bit of, we're certainly seeing a lot of passionate concern about this from really across the political spectrum, but especially from environmentalists who are saying that this is draconian.
Yep. This
will concentrate too much power in the hands of Shane Jones, Chris Bishop, and I think it is Simeon Brown.
Yep.
And that it's cutting corners, and we're going to end up with lots of mines and roads being quickly consented without due process for allowing the community to have some say over whether this should happen or not.
I mean, you and I have spoken about this before, and conspicuous by its absence in this, three heads making a decision, I suppose. There is nobody with an environmental representation there. Shane Jones has gone public about wanting to stamp out frogs and multicoloured geckos. You can see the reason for their concern. If they're not going to have input in the process when it happens, get in now while you still can, I suppose.
Yeah, and Christopher Bishop, who's sort of running this, has indicated that he's listening and he's willing to make some changes to the fast track process. And so I imagine that they will tinker and they'll make some things better by, yes, changing who the ministers are that are going to receive these applications. I imagine in the end they probably will include an environmental minister.
Yeah.
But I think at the center of the complaints about this is just the whole idea of a fast track cutting out everyone else.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a big tussle over the next few months. It's not till September, I think, that the Parliament has a final vote on this, but there's going to be a lot of protest marches before then. I think there's one due in Queen Street in a couple of weeks. And then once we find out, who's getting the nod, which developers and builders are getting this, there will also be a lot more controversy, and especially if it does end up having a negative impact on environmental areas.
I mean, circling back to the trust issue, of course, concerns that some of the people that might get greenlit are people that made significant donations to the political parties that have got the final say on this one. Interested in your thoughts, though. Shane Jones has come out swinging on this one. He is a representative of the New Zealand First Party. If he got flicked from this one, if he wasn't one of the three that made the decision, would that cause problems within the coalition? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a bit of talk about this around the Beehive at the moment, apparently. Shane Jones is kind of seen, because he's so kind of upfront about his allegiance to the fishing industry and the mining industry, that, I think he's become something of a lightning rod for discontent. Yes, with his colourful things about frogs and skinks and geckos. And so, yes, I think there might be a shift to try and take him out of it. And whether Winston Peters would find that objectionable if Luxon tries to remove that, there could be some coalition upsets, shall we say.
Yeah,
that's right.
But hey, I think anybody apart from Shane Jones, although he's an experienced minister in that regard, but anybody else from New Zealand First would perhaps be less of a lightning rod than he is. Hey, appreciate your comments and your time today, Bryce. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.